What's up, everyone? I'll be real with you. Never thought I'd be filming this video, but here we are, and we seriously need to talk about something massive. The possible removal of Jerome Powell, the current chair of the Federal Reserve. For months now, there have been swirling rumors, direct threats, and insider whispers suggesting he could be fired for not slashing interest rates. In fact, at the time I'm recording this, CNBC reported that the president asked lawmakers their thoughts on firing him, and they reportedly gave the green light. The president hinted that it might happen soon. So given how quickly this story is snowballing, we need to break down what this all means. What could really happen if Powell is fired? What the experts are predicting, and how it could ripple across the entire U.S. economy. No exaggeration, this could trigger fallout we've never seen before. And if you're not paying attention, well, you're in for trouble. But first, if you appreciate unbiased, no-nonsense finance content like this, hit that like button and consider subscribing. It's totally free, takes a second, and it genuinely helps the channel grow. I also do my best to reply to as many of your comments as I can, so let's talk down below. What is the Fed and why does it matter? Before we dive into whether Jerome Powell can really be fired, let's rewind for a second. What exactly is the Federal Reserve? At the most basic level, the Fed is the U.S. central bank. It's responsible for managing the economy, regulating banks, and controlling the money supply. Their primary mission? Promote a strong job market, maintain price stability, and ensure that our economy doesn't spiral out of control. In simple terms, they try to make sure economic growth continues, without letting things like egg prices soar to $10 a dozen. How do they do that? They manage inflation. If inflation is low, they can cut interest rates, making borrowing cheaper and boosting spending. But if inflation's running hot, they raise rates to cool things down. They regulate banks. The Fed ensures banks stick to guidelines and operate safely. They act as a safety net. If banks run into trouble, the Fed can step in to keep the system stable. Jerome Powell is the one steering this entire machine. He leads the Fed. And what makes his position unique is that the Federal Reserve operates independently. It doesn't take orders from Congress or the White House. Why talk of firing Powell is heating up. So why the sudden interest in firing him? It's all about interest rates. Over the past few years, the Fed has aggressively raised rates in the fastest tightening cycle in history. This is where the issue begins. Here's the problem. The U.S. has racked up a massive national debt, trillions of dollars. When interest rates were near zero, managing that debt was easy. But with higher rates, the cost of servicing that debt has exploded. So now we're stuck. Either we print more money to cover the debt, which devalues the dollar, or we cut interest rates to lower those payments, but risk reigniting inflation. Both paths carry major risks. Arguments for lowering rates. Some argue it's time to cut rates. Here's why. Producer Price Index shows wholesale inflation is flat. No increase last month, even with tariffs in place. Trump claims that rate cuts could save the U.S. government nearly $1 trillion per year in interest payments. Inflation is stabilizing. It's hovered below 3% for the past year, suggesting things are under control. So Trump is pushing for preemptive cuts before inflation picks back up again. Arguments against cutting rates now. On the flip side, experts warn against premature cuts. Inflation is creeping back. Recently, it rose more than 0.3% month over month, potentially pushing us back above 3% annually. The job market is still strong. Normally, the Fed cuts rates during high unemployment. But today's rate is near record lows. Tariffs are complicating things. Powell has said that trade uncertainty is holding them back from cutting rates. The Fed isn't just Powell. Decisions are made by a 12-member committee. Powell doesn't act alone. What happens if Trump tries to fire Powell? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Can a president even fire the Fed chair? Legally, a president can remove Federal Reserve board members for cause, things like inefficiency or misconduct. But it's unclear whether that extends to the chair. Some say yes. Others, including Powell, say absolutely not. The Supreme Court recently ruled that the Fed operates differently from other independent agencies, hinting Powell may be protected. So no, Trump can't fire Powell just because he disagrees with him. That would trigger a historic legal fight. But Trump can still apply pressure. How pressure can work, historical examples. This has happened before. In 1951, President Truman pressured Fed Chair Thomas McCabe to resign, and he did. In 1972, President Nixon pushed for lower rates ahead of an election, leading to later inflation. In 2018, Trump publicly criticized Powell, calling him clueless, but rates didn't budge. Today, Trump is trying a different strategy, criticizing the Fed's $2.5 billion headquarters renovation, calling it a disgrace. The goal? Make Powell's job miserable and push him toward resignation without actually firing him. What happens if Powell resigns? If Powell resigns under pressure, brace yourself. That would send shockwaves through the financial system. Why? Because if the Federal Reserve looks like it's no longer independent, investors will panic. Treasury yields could spike. Stocks could crash. The whole system could lose credibility. And if markets believe rate cuts are politically motivated, not data-driven, that could lead to a weaker dollar and rising inflation. Sure, in the short term, stocks might rally on lower rate hopes, but the long-term risks? Far more dangerous. What's most likely to happen? So what's next? Here's my honest take. I'd give less than a 1% chance that Trump actually fires Jerome Powell. It's just too legally risky. There's maybe a 19% chance Powell bends under pressure and cuts rates. And I'd give it an 80% chance that nothing major changes and Powell finishes his term, which ends in May 2026. At this point, I think Trump is testing the waters, watching how the markets react before making any move. And guess what? The market has spoken. Firing Powell? Bad idea. Still, don't rule out the possibility of Powell being pressured to the point of resignation. If that happens, be prepared. Final thoughts. So whether Powell holds on or cracks under pressure, it's going to be a wild ride, and honestly, nobody knows how it's going to play out. If you've made it this far, let me know what you think down in the comments. Agree? Disagree? I want to hear from you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.